which is lovely. All right, so we are talking today with some talent optimizers. And really, as we know in hiring, hiring is not what it used to be. We used to be on sort of a hope and a prayer that the employee that we were looking at and hoping that was going to work out, that was what it was. It was a lot of hope that it was going to work out, but we weren't using the science behind that to make sure and to know how that person is going to work with other people and who they're best going to work with and what that's going to look like. And for me, I've used this many times in the hiring process. For me, it gives me a lot of indication of things that I'm not seeing during the interview process. And that's really goes into the science behind what people will do that they're not verbalizing and that we're not seeing. So we've got Mike and Kirk with us today, and they are going to take it away, and they are really going to talk to us about this super fascinating topic. So gentlemen, go ahead and lead us on the way here.
Thank you, Cassie. My name is Mike Mosel with PeopleSurge. Kirk and I founded PeopleSurge a few years ago here. We're based in the Charleston, South Carolina area. And we like to say that we're in the confidence business. We help businesses become confident about who they're hiring, the teams that they're trying to build, and ultimately where the fun comes in for us is helping businesses execute on their business strategy. As we go through today, the subject today is really the title of the presentation is the impact of crisis in the workplace, and we're going to delve into three key elements, which I'm going to share in a minute. But just as a way of making sure that our participants get the most out of this session, we would encourage you to use the Q&A feature or the chat, whichever works best for you. Cassie is kindly going to monitor the Q&A queue as we go along. We will welcome questions as we go along, and we're also going to use the chat feature to upload and give you some takeaways, some key takeaways along the way. So, and we'll be sure to let you know as we upload those links. So first, to get things kicked off, Cassie, if you could monitor the chat, I'd like everybody who's participating to use their chat out of the gate and just pick a couple of the words that you see here that really most closely resonate with what's happening in your business today. So we'll give you about 15, 20 seconds just to go ahead and chat them in. And if you have one that's not on here, feel free to use that. So we got remote work. PPP, that's a pretty popular one. Uncertainty, remote work, changing priorities, good, good. All right. Fairly consistent with what we're seeing when we're talking to both our current clients and prospects. When we talk about, so let me back up a moment. What we hope to accomplish today is really to introduce you folks to the host of resources that are available to ultimately assist you in dealing with all of the challenging issues that you just presented there. We also want to kind of introduce you to this notion that you can use easy to understand behavioral science and data to effectively address the impacts of the crises that you're dealing with on the workplace. And fundamentally, as leaders, as HR professionals, as business owners, there's really two sides of a coin. Either hard decisions need to be made, and in some cases, hard decisions may have already been made. And as we talk today, we are really going to focus in on three key areas. We're going to unpack communication, the impact of crisis on communication and how to deal with it, what accountability looks like in a time of crisis. And then lastly, we'll focus the bulk of our time on leadership and team dynamics. What can leaders do to impact their leadership style to become more resilient? And how do we understand the impacts of crisis on our teams? So we'll first just start off, I always like to ask this question, it's more of a rhetorical question in this virtual setting, and that is to say that why do people behave as they do? And I think in our traditional model, as specifically, especially in the hiring process, we focus a lot of our time on the behaviors that we actually see. So we like to use the example of going to a Starbucks, right? When we think about the reasons why people go to a Starbucks, there are any number of reasons. They might be there for social interaction, although not so much today. They might be there for coffee. They might be there for the internet access to grab something to eat. And fundamentally, we are guessing at really what drove them to be there. When a lot of our work, when we do work with clients, focuses on if we can actually measure what's driving people, we can actually predict the needs and behaviors that are almost always going to present themselves in the workplace. And it's these needs and behaviors that are particularly magnified, especially in a time of crisis. So let's talk about, let's first unpack communication. This is a four-part quadrant that talks about the communication styles for four behavioral styles. So in the sense of someone who's personable, they're going to look for opportunities for social interaction. So right now, those folks that have personable styles may find it to be very challenging to work from home. Those folks that particularly like to work at a steady pace, that are patient and relaxed and calm, they may find this the ability to work from home welcoming. It's predictable. They can work on their own terms. When we talk about collaborative folks, those folks typically need harmony. They're going to need encouragement. So not being able to walk across the hall to someone's cube or to their desk can be challenging. And we've even talked to a number of clients who've been talking about something called Zoom fatigue, where this notion of collaborating virtually just isn't doing it for those folks that are particularly for your personable and for your collaborative folks. And then lastly, those folks that are flexible in their behavioral communication style, they are actually welcoming this new norm, this new structure. Maybe they work from 7 to 10 in the morning, take a break, maybe do some homeschooling or deal with personal childcare if they have kids at home. They may run errands. They may come pick back up and work in the afternoon from 3 to 5, take another break, work at night. So the communication style with those folks are going to be different than your patient folks, your collaborative, and your personable folks. And we may see some communication styles bleed over, but we always tend to focus on that communication style which is strongest, which is where we say that people are going to they're actually naturally going to recharge their batteries whenever someone is communicating in their most natural style. So when we talk about communication, there's really two aspects of communication. The first is clarity. How will this communication be most effective for those four styles? And then second, we'll talk about the style of the communication, which will ultimately provide a context for the outcome of that communication. And you know, when we think about these communication aspects, you know, ultimately we want to ensure that there's clarity, there's consensus, there's engagement, particularly now when there's new initiatives, team objectives may be shifting, companies may be rolling out a new business strategy. Things change from, you know, we started out in February, most businesses had a concrete plan set for the year, and literally overnight that changed. And I would say in the month of March and early April, we were seeing businesses pivot, particularly weekly and sometimes daily, just based on what was occurring in our environment. So let's talk a little bit about clarity and these communication styles. So your flexible people, for them to really receive clarity in that communication, we're going to need to be really specific with our instruction. They're going to tend to not get down in the details. So for clarity to come through on their end, it's going to be important we've got specific details of what's happening in that communication piece. For our patient people, giving them the why is so critical right now. Patient people are typically used to things being the same. It's steady. It's always done. We've always done business this way. So giving them the why is going to help them understand why you're now shifting to a new process, a new way of doing things. The personable folks, it's going to be important that you actually take time to recap those action items, those global action items. So they have a big picture way of thinking about everything. And then lastly, our collaborators, our collaborator folks, it's important that we're sharing the impact on the team. What does it look like when we roll out a new process? How does that impact my team members? How does my new schedule going to interact and interface? How might I now need to interact with my colleague who may have a different work schedule from mine? So those collaborators are really going to appreciate when communication is delivered in the context of the team. And then lastly, I'll focus just on the communication styles. So for flexible people tend to really thrive when there's not a lot of structure, where deadlines can be pressed, the boundaries of what's expected might not be adhered to. So communicate for the flexible folks, clear communication is going to provide that accountability. And in just a moment, Kirk's going to unpack, we're going to talk specifically about accountability and how it's showing up right now. For our patient folks, clear communication is going to create a sense of normalcy for that individual. They're going to welcome that clear, that relaxed, that consistent pace. For the personable folks, they're going to look for that outlet for social influence. They're going to gravitate towards opportunities when they can share their opinions, when they can be in communication with others. Any opportunity for them to leverage a face-to-face or individual one-on-one session is going to be welcomed. And then lastly, that communication style in terms of those collaborators, again, back to that team interaction, they're really going to welcome those opportunities to share ideas and bounce things off of each other, and really look to others in harmony in that communication style. So I want to take an opportunity to introduce Kirk, my business partner, and he works specifically, one of his one of the things I love about him is his fantastic ability to articulate the importance of how accountability shows up in the workplace, specifically when you're talking about leaders that are trying to set the tone for how to get things done, right? How to set the roadmap. So Kirk, why don't you take it away and talk a little bit about accountability?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Mike. Happy to see everyone here and happy to be a part of this. And I like to step back sometimes when we're going through this is also put this in a bigger context that we're all human beings and we're social animals. And at the heart of all of that is that we behave in certain ways. And we're driven to those behaviors. So therefore that impacts the way we communicate and impacts the way other people hear us. And that at the end of the day, we're in that communication is that I'm trying to send a message and I'm hoping that someone's going to receive it on the other end. And it's going to be taken the way that is going to be the most impactful for that person and also for what I'm trying to achieve. And so we just had to put the whole thing in this social animal context. And so when we think about accountability, all we're talking about is a process for behavior change. We're just trying to find a way that we can create a structure and process and place to where when people are as these social animals are behaving in ways that are not helpful for us as a team or as a business or in a relationship, how can we create a structure to where it becomes a team sport and that we can have this process for that person having the motivation to want to change their behavior. And so when we think about accountability, that's really what we're talking about here. And at the heart of it is that it becomes down to an integrity issue for me, in that if I'm going to say I'm going to do something, or I agree to do something for the team, or this is what we believe in and I'm acting in a different way, my integrity is in check. And if I'm part of a team, I want the team to help create a process so that my integrity can stay right and that I don't have those issues, so that we can move together as a team. And so the first part of thinking about accountability is that we've got to be clear. And as Mike is setting the tone in the communication piece, is that we've got to have something that we're clear around. Some organizations have values, some organizations have behaviors that we agree are important, missions and visions that are important. We have team protocols, we have procedures in the organization. But at the heart of it, for your team and for yourself, is that we've got some process for saying, this is what we agree to do, and we've made it very clear of what that is. I've said it, it's been written down somewhere, it's in our rituals, it's whatever it is, we've got some process for understanding that we all agree that this is something that's important for us as a team, and we have clarity around that. So that's step one. And then two, we want to process for keeping that integrity in check, having a process for getting the feedback that we need to get in the process. Because at the heart, I cannot hold anyone else accountable. And therefore, no one else can hold me accountable for things. But what we can do is we can create the process and the environment so that that's clear. And when we go out of that integrity things that we said we were going to do something and I went against it and I behaved in a different way and my pattern has been this, then there's a process that's clear that I know I'm going to be going into, because the team has said, this is what we're going to do when we don't follow the things that we say are important. So this process is really important. And we're going to share with you in the next slide is going to be a process for doing this. But I want to set the tone for it in that it's the accountability process is not punitive. It's just about behavior change. This is not something where someone's being punished for it. It's somebody is, we're putting someone through a process of questions so that they can come to the enlightenment and the insight to say, yes, that's true. I was not integrity with these things that we say are important. But through the process, we're asking them questions so that they get to the point to say, here's what I'm going to do. Here's how it's going to be different. And we're not leading the process and leading the witness. Let's call it leading the witness in this, is that we're just asking questions. So it's not punitive. And so let's take an example. Let's say as a team, one is we agree to be on time. So when our meetings start at 8 o'clock, we agree to be there on time and we're not late for those. And so we've got this agreement, we've made it clear and everybody understands what that means. And if that person's out of it and they've missed the last 2 or 3 meetings, or they've been late, they've been delayed, is that our team has a no excuse policy. You know, we might have reasons for things and we've made that clear to say, if you're late, here are the reasons that you can be late. But we have a no excuse policy. So what was the original agreement that we had as a team? To be on time. And what's been happening the last 2 or 3 weeks? I've been late for all these excuses that I'm giving, and they're not in the reasons that we had. So I've been out of integrity with this. So we're asking the questions. And what are the consequences of that behavior on the team? What are the consequences for you, both consciously and unconsciously? And we want to spend a lot of time in step 3 in giving them the space to come to the realizations that what are all the consequences for being late? And we want that space to come out, because if we don't get to the point of the consequences and we're not giving them the space to sort through that, then we can't get to the next step, which is the behavioral change. What do I need to do differently? And what am I going to agree to going forward? And I'm going to have to recommit myself to this process. And then we get into step 6, which are the repercussions, the consequences of this. And we're asking them, you know, what are the consequences if you're late again? You know, we've made this clear. Being on time is important. You've agreed that you've been out of it. You say you want to meet that agreement. What are the consequences if you don't do it again? And so this is where the person is creating those consequences for them. And I may come up and say, you know what, if I'm late again, I'm going to buy everyone lunch next week. Or there was one that was an extreme example of a team member where the team member was an avid Democrat supporter, a liberal person, and there was the elections were going on, and the team said, you know what, if you're late again, you're going to send $10,000 to the top Republican candidate. And they agreed for that. And what happened is that the consequences were enough for her to change her behavior, and she wasn't late again. So what it is that you're just finding whatever those consequences are, that it's enough to where I'm putting it out there because this is important, and I need to know if I'm going to not follow it, then this is what's going to happen. And lastly, as a team, we're saying, how can I support you as a manager, as a leader? What can I do to help you in this process? And we're having that clear communication. So through this, we're just asking questions, and just remember, if you're going to think about doing something like this in your team, you want to be clear about what it is we're agreeing to. And we want to say that we have a process for doing this, and it's a question, it's an inquiry process, and that we're just creating the process to help you achieve something that you said was important for you to achieve.
Got it. That's great. That's great. So in this context of accountability, I want to shift gears around how accountability shows up for leadership, and really ask the audience here, you know, which stage is your company currently experiencing? And a lot of this may go back to some of the first early answers there, but I encourage you to use the chat feature here to just pick one of these 3 words. What of these 3 words would you describe as occurring for your organization right now? Don't be shy. Yeah, so we got a lot of some survivors, some stabilizers. Good. So, again, that's the key aspect of surviving and thriving. One of the two most important aspects there are they both start with hard decisions, right? And as leaders, it can be really challenging to make hard decisions. So we're going to spend about the next 10 to 12, 13 minutes talking about leadership specifically, how we show up as leaders, and also its impact on our teams. So when we think about leading in crisis, a couple of the key things that come to mind our business priorities are continually pivoting. Even now more than ever, the performance of our people boils up, right? It's now highlighted, it's amplified. And a lot of times what we do in our work is really to teach our clients how to understand their leadership styles, but most importantly, we also give them the tools and the understanding to give them insight into how can they realign and lead their people to execute on all these new vast changing priorities. When we talk about leading in crisis, and Kirk, maybe you can just unpack VUCA real quick. It's a common term. But it's a term that's really amplified right now when we talk about VUCA, and it shows up both in the world, the environment, and also it's a great acronym to use for our leadership styles. So can you just say a little bit about that?
Yeah. The VUCA term is a military term that stood for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. And in a military environment, those are the things that you're dealing with. And it's applicable to what's going on in the world today, especially in crisis, in that we have those things that are happening. And therefore, in a leadership, to combat VUCA is to come up, you've got to have a vision, understanding, you've got to have the ability for caring and agility. And that allows you to combat this world. And so great leaders in this environment are going to want to be self-aware. They want to, accept feedback and be interested in feedback, but they need to be able to give the right amount of feedback for people. They've got to be compassionate. And at the heart of this is we just want to think about, once again, it's about social behaviors within an organization. And that as social animals, we want to have this sense of belonging. And when we have that sense of belonging, when we understand that our role makes sense, what I do as a person makes sense, then we're going to have more confidence to be committed to things. Amidst crisis, that sense of belonging becomes very questioned, and there's a lot of stuff that gets in the way of that feeling of that sense of belonging. So as a leader, these are the things that we want to do to be very blatant and transparent and inspiring and supportive around this stuff, especially during this period of crisis.
Yeah, that's good. And a lot of that, a lot of what you just shared, we actually have science and data and tools that we're going to share with you now, just to kind of show you how you can deal with VUCA using a proven methodology. So let's first talk about some of the risks here to leaders. The first we're going to cover is this concept of overused strengths. In crisis mode, leaders can tend to over-rely on their natural styles, their natural behavioral styles, or their strengths. We see leaders needing to have an understanding of how to realign their team around ever-changing priorities that I mentioned back in February. Most businesses had a plan. They had an agenda for 2020, or at least for Q1 or Q2, and that all went out the window in the second week of March. And then lastly, leaders have to inspire their people to perform. So how do we inspire productivity? How do we unfreeze the workforce to be able to get them to move forward? So what does overused strengths really look like? It really looks like leaders tending to lean heavily on what they're good at, and then the opposite effect, which we're going to show here, is that let's say I'm leading my sales team, and in Q1, as a result of the crisis, my team missed our sales quarter, our goal. I'm concerned that I might lose my job. I'm going to lean on my strengths, my behavioral attributes that I'm aware of to set stronger goals. I'm going to rely on my intensity, my drive. I'm going to set up clear, actionable items for my team to step up. And woohoo, congratulations, my team just needed that extra push to rise to the occasion. The flip side of that coin is that the team missed our goal. I'm afraid to lose my job still occurs. And I go to that natural work style. And now that natural work style, without an awareness of how my team needs to be managed or interact, or like we like to say, how they prefer to be engaged right now, those strengths that were those attributes that were once strengths now end up causing and creating more anxiety and stress on both the leader and, more importantly, the employees. So we begin to say, well, how do we go about understanding what it is that we're good at? And we leverage behavioral science from the predictive index. And I would encourage you, in just a moment, I'm going to put up in the actual chat feature just how you can take advantage of the PI behavioral assessment. That's part of what we wanted to share with you folks today, is to be able to offer you this link that I'm going to put up in the chat. So I would encourage you to click on it, bookmark it. You can take the assessment after the session, and we will email out to each person their individualized 3-page behavioral report. So feel free to use that link right there after the webinar, and it was also attached incidentally to the invite. All right, so let's talk about adapting how you lead. When you actually take the behavioral assessment, you will, there are 17 different profiles in predictive index speak, and each of these reference profiles happens to be oriented with a particular behavioral emphasis. We've got our explorers here, which are represented by these 4 reference profiles. We've got our producers. So think of these folks that are driven, they're competitive, they're very demanding, they set tight deadlines. We've got our stabilizers. A lot of you folks mentioned that you're in stabilizing mode right now. So these are your folks that are going to be creating new processes. They might be coordinating new initiatives. They may be looking for ways to become more efficient right now. And then lastly, this is a time when leaders that have the natural cultivating style, this is going to show up particularly well for these folks that are both good at receiving and giving, that are good around people, that are comfortable around nurturing and developing and being supportive, transparent, and empathetic in their leadership style. And it's important that as we work with our clients, we help them really get in touch with not only that behavioral style, but more specifically, how it's going to show up in times of crisis. And we'll actually walk them through, for instance, I'll just give you an example here of an exploring leader those exploring leaders, they're big picture thinkers, they're innovators, they're risk takers. Well, right now, there might be cautions to that, and there might be strengths to that. So the normal behavioral styles for our exploring leaders is to be socially confident, to be outgoing, love being creative and taking new risks. They're going to avoid the structure and process. And it really might be important when we talk about how crisis impacts that natural, normal style. A lot of your explorers may take uncalculated risks. They may act impulsively. They may generate impractical ideas. So because they're brainstorming, they might be inundating their employees with a lot of new ways to do things. Oh, we did it this way last week. Now I've got a great idea. Let's do it this way the next week, right? Cassie, I see you're smiling. You may have some experience with that with, oh my gosh, I know a new way we can do it. Last week we were doing it this way. So that style, without understanding how that's going to impact your teams, that can really rub folks the wrong way, so to speak. So we are able to now give some tips and some coaching to leaders that are, for instance, our explorers right now. And that is to say, hey, before you do that outward brainstorming that might overwhelm your folks, let's discuss those ideas in public before you go sharing them. Let's try not to offer suggestions until maybe you've thought things through. Maybe you've thought through, hey, what's the impact of me suggesting this? What's the impact to my team if I now tell them we're going to do something a new way? And then lastly, it's important for explorers to really, and this is going to be a stretch for them, they're not typically going to be comfortable with details, but it's now more than ever, they're going to need to stretch and offer details, not just brainstorm. They're going to actually have to think through a detailed way of executing that plan. And so this is just a way, as we're working with leaders, we encourage them to lead by taking advantage of their natural strengths. And then we begin to coach them around where are they beginning to flex? Where can they flex around that natural behavior? How can they maybe delegate some of those areas of their leadership style where they're just not really that proficient at, or that's not going to come natural to them. They're not going to be able to recharge right now, because as leaders, we too need to be recharging in this time of crisis. So when we talk about leadership and teams, part of what we're offering here in partnership with Summit Insurance, when you do complete that behavioral assessment, we're going to walk you through this one-to-one in a complementary setting. And we're going to teach you how these how these behavioral styles are going to show up specifically for you in your workplace. And speaking of workplace, there's really, you've got a leader, you're a leader in your organization. And we like to say there are really two sides of the same coin. There's really the work that needs to be done by your team. And then there's the who's doing the work, right? And what's really fascinating for guys like Kirk and I is that we really begin to unpack and really get clear on the natural work styles of the team. And then in our work, we're also able to boil up and bring to the surface the work that needs to be done. And one of the ways that we're able to do that is by taking our clients, particularly right now, where things are just, everything is changing. We've been offering the ability to take prospective clients through a 90-minute complimentary session where we can begin to actually see the team style, the actual team work style, the DNA of their team. let's say maybe there's 4 to 6 folks, key team members on a particular team. On the outside here in blue is the actual, the behavioral orientation of the team. And then we can take them through, customized to the client. We can take them through what is the work that they're now focusing on most, what's most meaningful for their business right now. So it's a great opportunity, again, to use science and data to see, are we aligned as a leadership team? And where are we misaligned? Where might we really fall short of? Who should we really now be relying on our team to maybe go lead that new initiative? Now more than ever, our clients are relying on the ability to use this science and data to do just that. And this is, again, where we talk about really unpacking what it means to be an exploring team. And incidentally, when we talk about this framework, there's really, a few years ago, a very famous Harvard Business School professor actually created what's known as the competing values framework, which was a way of being able to characterize what business strategy really looks like for organizations. And the organizations that are able to align their teams, their leadership teams, their operational folks around these particular competing values frameworks, we find are really the most successful organizations. So these exploring teams, they're going to be your innovators. You think of your Ubers, your Airbnbs. Think of your producers are going to be, really keen on coming up with metrics that they can measure and that really distinct KPIs. Your stabilizers, think of your banks, your hospitals, folks that are pretty consistent. Although right now, I would argue that even hospitals that are, hospitals might be a good situation right now to think of hospitals that are typically in the stabilizing mode. What might they need to be doing? What areas might they be struggling with as a leadership team to shift now to coming up with new ways to do business, new ways to treat patients, new, we saw a lot of ways to triage, a lot of mobile ICU units. I can assure you those ideas likely did not come from the hospital. They probably came from folks that have that orientation for exploring. And then lastly, from a cultivating strategy, those organizations, think of these as your nonprofit organizations, those folks that are really good about creating that feel-good effect. And here's just a little look at what that looks like. You've got, your externally leading folks, which are your explorers and your producers. On the left-hand side, we've got our internal, more organizational folks. Up on top, you've got your transformers, your leaders. And then down on the bottom, we have your manager, your managing styles. And here's where we begin to see at least one and sometimes two competing frameworks show up for organizations. So when we work with clients, when we take them through this exercise, we're going to really be able to quickly be able to unpack what that means specifically for your organization, giving you some clues about what you might need to focus on as an organization. So the obvious question then is, when we are misaligned, when we don't have that alignment, this puts pressure for sure on both the leader and the workforce. And again, back to the work that we enjoy doing is using that science and data to really unpack okay, where do we have alignment? Which areas of this framework do we really have alignment? Right at both from the team aspect. So think about being able to unpack at the team level, where are we, what's the overall view? And then what's even more interesting is when you can begin to then unpack what it looks like here at the individual level. What are the individual tendencies for those work styles? And then lastly, we begin to help our clients really create what we call a recovery blueprint to say, where are you aligned based on your competing framework? Where are the alignments? Where are you aligned? And then where are the gaps? And then ultimately, what do we need to do? How do we need to pivot to help you maybe shift to deal with some of these new priorities? Do we need to hire folks? If we've just gone through a RIF, what does the new workplace DNA look like of our teams? How do we use science to really figure out why maybe a particular department is doing well, but maybe another department is really struggling with what's going on? And that's really the purpose of this exercise, is to we can go at the leadership level, the global level, and we can even drill down and say, what does that look like at the team level? Where are they aligned? Where are the gaps? What are some of the things that we're going to need to, what are some of the areas that we're going to need to focus on? So invariably, when we talk about the areas to focus on, we really begin to get down to the individual behavioral styles. And that's where we're really talking about, how do we unfreeze people? How do we really get them to move off of what might be occurring for them? And these are just some examples of what frozen or paralyzed or lack of productivity or really struggling to move through this time of uncertainty might look like. Again, back to those folks that are used to things being consistent, they may struggle right now because the goal line, think of I'm going to date myself here with most people, hopefully some people remember Charlie Brown and Lucy always trying to move the ball as he went to kick it. So, it's kind of just like that. Hey, boss, last week you said we needed to be here and do it this way. Now you're telling us it's got to be a different way. Which way is it? I used to have my assistant on my team, and now because of a RIF, I no longer have that person that was going to pay attention to my schedule and make sure I was on time for my meetings. How can I deal with that? Or, geez, now I'm working from home, and I have to deal with, raising my children. I've got school issues. I've got young children. I'm a parent, I'm dealing with homeschooling issues and all that provides. So how do we help support those folks in all the complexity? And we really go right back to that behavioral assessment to say, who are the folks that we may now need to coach more so than others? Who are those folks that are really sociable people that, hey, you know what? I need to know as a leader, I might need to now reach out to them. I might need to schedule that face-to-face using the appropriate social distancing measures. For those folks that are not your sociable folks, hey, I know Bill or Sally is just fine. Their heads down. Geez, I know Samantha really likes this new flexible schedule because she can work a little bit in the morning and work and, transition to being a single mother or a single parent. And now she can get, the bulk of her work done in the evening. And having the cues from this behavioral data can really help us lean into what might be occurring for employees. And there's a host of tools inside the software platform, and we're happy to share part of what we're doing right now is really, our goal is really just to be a resource for both our current clients and anybody that's really curious about how this type of work can be meaningful for them.
And to echo a little bit of that, Mike, in thinking about us as human beings, as social animals, and having this sense of belonging, the question that you've got for managers and leaders is, how can we have the awareness around what the drives are about our people? Because then we can find out where their strengths and motivators are. Because as change and because I think changing priorities was mentioned earlier, remote work, team dynamics, at the heart of all of that is we're trying to understand each individual, and we want to be able to pull on their strengths. So in a world where we're moving to remote work, who is best suited on our team to help us come up with the structures and the processes for us to operate the best as a remote team? And the more that we understand the strengths and motivators and drives of our people, then we can manage that. We can manage the information, and we can create a team environment that hopefully will be better suited for results and ultimately less anxiety. That anxiety is going to take us to a much different place. So we want to help in our teams to uncover that. And I think foundationally, it's creating that sense of belonging. And the best tool that I've been able to find is finding some process for understanding their drive so that I can create that sense of belonging quicker, sooner, faster for those people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, we truly, as Kirk and I are not, we're not HR professionals. We are not behavioral scientists. We are company builders. We are human beings. We have our own challenges as entrepreneurs as well. And we genuinely enjoy giving back to organizations, particularly right now, to really be not only a resource, to be a voice, a sounding board, and really to be a resource where people can learn about how science and data can really help them move beyond, specifically in this time of crisis. I'm going to include here, I'm going to link here into the chat a link to an ebook that you are welcome to download. It's going to have some great insights into a whole host of things that we talked about today. I would encourage you to download that as well. We'll keep that open in the chat. And then, just lastly, I would really encourage you to take advantage of the behavioral assessment link that was on the invite and that we included here in the chat. You are welcome to use that for anywhere between 3 and 5 of your team members. We're happy to send you the behavioral reports, some of the other manager tools in your capacity as either HR leaders, as leaders of your business, as business owners, whatever role that might be for you. We'd encourage you to download a copy of that ebook. And then we always take time to have one-on-one consultations with folks that complete those behavioral assessments, just to walk you through the easy to understand data. And I know, Cassie, you have done the PI assessment. It's a 2-question, 5 to 6 minute assessment. We're not talking about a long drawn out process here. We're talking about science and data that's been around for about 65 years. And I know, Molly, will be looking forward to sharing with you some insights into your behavioral report as a promoter. But I'd just like to open it up. I know we're, keeping to Cassie. I know you were great at starting on time. I figure we just open it up. A lot of times people are shy. Some of our low, not so sociable folks might be a little reluctant to raise their hand in a group. So happy to keep the forum open here for the next 5 minutes as we go to the top of the hour.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. People can feel free to unmute themselves. You can go ahead and enter a question in the chat if you're more comfortable doing that. you're more than welcome to email us your question, and we're happy to get that to Mike and Kirk as well. I think as you're thinking of your question, this information to me is super fascinating. And I think because of the science behind it, it's perfectly timed for the things that we're presently going through, which is there's all this noise, all these changes that are happening. And information like this, the science behind this, will help us all refocus our employees and our businesses on what it is we need to do to go forward. The going forward it can happen. We will do it, but we need a little bit of help to get there. And this is the kind of help we need to make our teams more effective in this new space, to make our businesses more effective and more efficient in this new space, and to really reach the goals that we need to reach as people and as businesses. So if you've not done something like this before, oh my gosh, you must do it. You must at least take the assessment. It's fascinating. Your own report will be fascinating, and your team members' reports will be completely fascinating. Will change the way you look at yourself, which will be helpful for your own development personally, but also will change the way you manage your teams and help your teams work together. And that will only have a positive impact on your business. So I really encourage you to do this. Download the ebook, do the assessment. It's a must do. So let's see here. People with questions. Do we have any questions, or are you just so stoked to, I'm going to unmute some folks here. Are you just so stoked to get to the ebook and the assessment that you don't want to ask your questions now, which is fine. Totally fine. I'm unmuting all the lines. So know that you're unmuted and you feel free to ask your question.
I have a quick question. What kind of data is out there that supports or demonstrates how companies who are more effective at managing this kind of change or these times of uncertainty versus those who don't really have a plan in place or aren't actively managing these types of things? Is there any type of data out there that demonstrates the success versus the continued troubles companies have?
Yeah, good question. We don't have immediate, certainly this COVID period is an unprecedented time. Mm-hmm. It's probably the most chaotic. So I don't know that there's any real-time data on that, but what I will say is there's data around using this type of science to hire the right people increases your chance of finding the right folks anywhere between 55 and 60%. Okay. We find that from a strategy perspective, businesses are anywhere between 30 and 35% more likely to be able to go execute on their business, to deliver the results that they're trying to deliver on when they align their people around business strategy. And the work that we do is really to bring those two in alignment. And that's where really the magic happens. Whether it's pandemic crisis mode or not, we would encourage businesses now more than ever to kind of leverage that. So don't have any specific data right now, only just data from non-pandemic times.
Right. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, and the only thing I could add to that, I don't have any research, but anecdotally, what I've seen over the last 4 months is that businesses are in extremes. Even a business that had to shut down and lay off 400 people. When you looked at the leadership team and the teams that were running those, what I found is that the ones that were already in the space of having this awareness as a foundation for what they're doing, whether it's self-awareness, organizational awareness, team awareness, just understanding things just at a higher level, and they were practicing that, those teams adapted more quickly than their competitors. Just anecdotally, I find that just taking the awareness practice, whatever type of awareness you're trying to do to bring into my own self-awareness as a manager or as a leader, as an employee, you start that, your company and your business and your teams have a much higher rate of adapting and changing versus their competitors. So that's just what I've seen. I don't have any research to show that, just anecdotally.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Byron, thanks for the interaction, man.
Sure
Appreciate the
thing.
questions.
All right, so we are going to go ahead and close out here. We're at 12:01, which is great. A super amazing use of our time today, I feel like, Mike and Kirk. Thank you so much. What we're going to do at the conclusion today, just in closing, we will send you a survey. We would love to know what you think of this. And you know what I think of it, obviously. I think it's amazing. But we do want your opinion on it as well. We will also send out the presentation to folks that signed up. So you've got it, you've got the links. We will probably include those again in our email so that people have those, the link for the ebook plus the link for the assessment, so that we make sure you have those. And thank you so much to Mike and Kurt. This was awesome. We really appreciate it. If you've not reached out to them, I encourage you to do so. And thank you for attending as usual. We love interacting with all of our people, and we want to continue doing it. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. Everyone stay safe, and do not hesitate to reach out to us if there's anything we can do for you.
Thank you, Cassie.
Thanks so much. Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.